Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, March 21st, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. Next season came earlier than expected for the Kansas Jayhawks after their heartbreaking loss in the second round of the NCAA Tournament. The defending national champion will bid farewell to its All-America player, Jalen Wilson, and because he's projected by many to be an NBA draft lottery pick, Gradey DIck might be gone as well, along with Kevin McCullough. It's likely only two starters will return in point guard Dajuan Harris and big man KJ Adams. How will Bill Self and his staff fill out the lineup and the rotation next season? Beat writers Gary Bedore and Shreyas Laddha provide the first look and address the many questions for the 2023-24 Jayhawks on today's SportsBeat KC podcast. So let's get started. There's plenty to talk about with Kansas basketball. We're going to do so with Gary Bedore and Shreyas Laddha. We're going to talk about the future of the program, the immediate future, but we need to have the funeral for Kansas basketball. And listen, that's a poor choice of words given the fact that Bill Self couldn't be with the team because of his heart problem. Let's go ahead and start there. Were you guys were you expecting him to coach in the second round game against Arkansas? We got the word, I guess, day before, day of, that he wasn't going to be able to coach in the first round. But Gary, what was how did that kind of come down on the Saturday that Bill Self wasn't going to be able to coach?
Well, he had doctors there, and I don't know, and the chancellor's a doctor too. So I think they consulted, and the doctors said no way. But all along, I was thinking Sweet 16 would be his first appearance, maybe, because it still had only been a week and change since he had a heart procedure. And, you know, people can go back to work, but this is coaching. And, you know, his style of coaching is aggressive. So this was just terrible timing. Never good timing to be ill, but poor Bill, maybe he would have coached Sweet 16, but even that, who knows, because it's tough. I mean, he would have had to fly all the way to Vegas, and he's just had the surgery not long ago. So even though some people go to work 2 days after getting stents put in, this is coaching, and I'm glad for him and his family and his health that he didn't do it, because this is serious business, and Bill Self's been a great man, and you want him to be healthy.
Yeah, look, here's hoping nothing but good wishes for Bill Self. Comes back completely healthy and will resume the duties of being the head coach, the high pressure duties of being the head coach of Kansas basketball. I know that every coach that has been asked about it during the Big 12 tournament and throughout the NCAA is nothing but good words and well wishes for Bill Self. We certainly feel the same way when it comes to this situation. So, Shrey, I mean, you covered the team all year, and you've got, this was your first year covering KU basketball, and you got to see how this program operates, how the team works, how it functions. I know a lot of the talk after the loss to Arkansas in the second round was, would Bill Self have made a difference had he been 100% and coaching this game? I've got some thoughts on that, but I want to hear yours since you're on press row all year with his team. What kind of difference could Bill Self have made? Would he have made a difference in this game?
I think a little bit, I thought, honestly, Norm did a pretty good job overall. For the most part, I know a lot of times people are easy to point, he didn't do this, he didn't do that. The one real thing, and I wrote about it, was I think KJ probably should have come in instead of sitting for 9 minutes after he picked up that foul. You can clearly see that some of the other guys like Zuby and Zach Clemens were just not ready for a moment like that. They haven't played pretty much all year. Zach had played 7 minutes since January. Zuby averages 5 minutes per game. And Arkansas is attacking them at the rim. I mean, that's what they do best, and that's where you want a guy like KJ, who has great basketball IQ, boxes out when needed. He's not like the greatest rebounder, but he's been impressive overall all year. I think that's the one thing I could say, hey, I think Bill would have recognized that and pulled the leash of those guys a little earlier, even if, KJ has 4 fouls. But I also do think, there was a lot of just external pressure on this team from Bill not being there. There's so much talk about, him not being in the locker room. I'm sure they read about it on Twitter. I'm sure, they were feeling heavy hearts because, he's their coach. He's a guy that's been in their corner since day one, since they've come to the program. And it's an extenuating factor. These are college kids. It's hard to expect them to be consistent on a regular basis, even with Bill Self in their corner. I wasn't surprised necessarily that they lost to Arkansas, but I was, the way it happened was almost like un-Kansas-like, I think, a little bit. They looked out of sorts in the last couple of minutes. They're missing free throws. They were making some mental errors. And I think that's where Self would have been nice to have a little bit, because Norm, I think, did a pretty good job overall, but there were a couple moments that I'm like, oh, okay, I think Self would have, pulled the leash a little earlier on the whole Zuby, Edgever, and Zach Clemens thing or whatever. But, you live and you learn, and obviously it's difficult circumstances, and I think Norm did a pretty good job in, being thrust into a role that he was thrust into overall.
For me, there was just one play that I thought of after the game that if Bill had been on the bench, I don't think it would have unfolded the way it did, and that was Dajuan Harris's 10-second violation, the backcourt violation. Look, I thought the call was a little shaky to begin with. I thought he was at the line at 10 seconds, but I think that's something Bill Self would have sensed and would have got him up the floor a little quicker, right? Just sounded the alarm. Come on, let's go. Just something he would have yelled out and would have gotten the attention. And instead of Kansas having a turnover there, I think they had the lead at the time. Obviously, they had the lead because they had the lead for all but just the last couple of moments of the game. But that's just one place where I thought maybe it would have had a direct impact. All right, guys. So, as Gary, you've seen many, many times a sad KU locker room after an unexpected NCAA tournament loss. I've seen them too. How did guys like Jalen Wilson and Kevin McCullough handle? Knowing this was their last game, how'd they handle things in the locker room in the post game?
Good question. McCullough was crying a little bit. Jalen was fine. Gradey DIck was unfazed, it seemed. He was lamenting the loss, and praising his teammates and saying it was the most fun he's ever had. But Pettiford was okay. Joseph Yesufu seemed pretty crushed. The young bigs were fine. Uday and Zuby. Clements didn't talk to the media. MJ Rice was not receptive to interviews. He was listening to something. But Kevin McCullough took it the worst, I would say. Wilson was sad. They all were sad, but I think Norm told them to hang their heads high, so they did, pretty much. Because they went through a lot. They didn't have their head coach. They won the Big 12. They did okay in the Big 12 tournament. So they still had a very good year after winning the national title, and I think Norm set the tone and told them to be proud and all that. The guys pretty much were.
Yeah, didn't have their coach at the beginning or the end of the season, did they?
Yeah, so that's a good point again.
As it turned out. All right, I know this is kind of early, but I want to take a break, and when we come back, I want to discuss the future. A lot of players have a decision to make, and then how KU basketball shapes up for the 23-24 season. So we'll be right back on SportsBeat KC. Hey, this is Blair. There are several ways to access the Star Sports section. Let me tell you about a couple of them. There is Sports Pass. For $12.99 a month, you get unlimited digital access to all the Star Sports content, including beat writing, columns, features, pretty much everything we write. The deal renews monthly until you tell us to cancel. For $159.99 a year, you get everything the Star has to offer digitally, including sports and the e-edition. Go to kansascity.com and drop down to the bottom of the page where it says Start a Subscription for more information. Your support has never been more important. As always, thanks for reading and listening. We're back on SportsBeat KC talking Kansas basketball, and unexpected end of the season happened Saturday. We're doing that with beat writers Shreyas, Laddha, and Bedore. So, as Gary, you veteran of this war of college basketball and season endings, everybody wants to know what's going to happen next year, what decisions are going to have to be made. And a new element to all of this postseason conversation is the transfer portal, how that's going to have an impact. So let's start with the obvious. Who is definitely not going to be back next season?
Definitely. You got Jalen Wilson and you got Kevin McCullough. So you only return two starters in Dajuan Harris and KJ Adams. Gradey DIck remains lottery, I guess. At least the NBA guys I know. So I would say 90% he's probably going to the NBA. Then transfers, everybody wants to play nowadays. But, it's also projected minutes. Sometimes the coaches, when they meet with guys, tell them what it looks like in terms of projection, and then they decide to leave. So, for sure, just from what guys said, they can change their minds. Pettiford said he wants to come back. Yesufu said he wants to come back. The two bigs said they want to come back. So you might lose a Kyle Cuff, who hasn't played. You already lost Cam Martin. He's entered the portal. MJ Rice didn't play at all. He was hurt a lot. Rumors he might want out. Hasn't talked much, so I don't really know for sure. And Zach Clemens hasn't played in 2 years much, never made the rotation. One might think he wants out, but he hasn't said anything.
Okay.
So that's a lot of guys that could leave, and I don't really know. They enter the portal fast and furious, and then Self hits the portal. And
right.
He's going to need some portal guys to fill in because they only got two starters returning. So, and both guys aren't known for scoring. They can score, but Dajuan and KJ are your only two for sure, probably.
Right. So, Shreyas, how do you what are the biggest needs for Kansas basketball next season? They lose not only their leading scorer in Jalen Wilson, but an All-America talent, right? And Kevin McCullough was one of the great defensive players in college basketball this season. Those are two big elements to remove from the team. I kind of agree with Gary. I'd like to get your thoughts on this too. When you were projected to be selected, where Gradey DIck is projected to be selected, I think the business decision has to weigh in favor of leaving for him. I guess the door is cracked open a little bit, but I think he's gone. So what do you think about Gradey DIck and his choice and his decision? And then where does Kansas have the biggest needs for next year?
So, I think it's, like you said and Gary said, the door of a lottery talent, the window is always finite. Tomorrow he comes back, he tears his ACL, he's going to go down, the draft boards. God forbids he comes back, he has a worse season because the best players next to him were Dajuan Harris and KJ Adams instead of Jalen Wilson and Kevin McCullough. Imagine how tough it was for Gradey to score when the entire opposing teams always tried to stop him. He was always number one option. Jalen Wilson might have had the better numbers. He might have been more gouty, but it was clear if you watched Kansas basketball this past year, Gradey DIck was the most respected and most feared player on that Kansas team because he could shoot from anywhere on the court. And just, when you talk to the opposing coaches after the game, and the amount of respect they have for a 19-year-old kid is immense. So tomorrow he comes back and, he has a worse season and he's a year or two older. You're looking at a guy that could drop out of the lottery. So I just don't think it makes a ton of sense for him to come back and keep millions of dollars on the table. And people might say he's not ready or he's not. Listen, it doesn't matter. He has to go figure it out. He has to go figure out the NBA. And I've always been a big advocate for, if you are projected to be a high draft pick or mid-round first draft pick, go out and get the bag. It's better to go get that than leave it up to chance. I think there's very few people in college basketball that have come back from being lottery picks to even better the next year. Usually what happens is the reverse is something, they get an injury or they play worse the next season and they're a year older, so the NBA is looking at them like, oh wow, there's some flaws that maybe we didn't see last year that we saw now. I just think it makes sense. I mean, with the Gradey thing, it's weird because he's a Kansas guy. He grew up obsessed with Kansas. He's a Wichita kid. He wanted to play for Bill Self. I'm sure he'd love to come back, but logically the business decision and the most sensible decision I think for his career is to go to the NBA, hope you get drafted by an organization that knows what they're doing, and really develop. Take a couple of years to develop his defense, get a couple of years to showcase he can do more with the ball in his hands. But he showcased a little bit in Kansas, and I think his career could be a really long career, and it could go a lot of different ways. It just depends on the team that picks him, how he develops, and his role, I think. And then kind of building off that, I was looking at the roster. If Gradey doesn't come back, you're looking at 45 points per game Kansas has to replace between him, Kevin, and Jalen. That's a lot of points. Even if you're looking at internal improvement from guys like Ernest and KJ and Dajuan or whatever, you're really going to have to go rely on at least one of those freshman guys out of the four that are coming in to hit. You need them to hit at least that 12, 13 points per game mark. And then you really need to hit on one or two scorers portal-wise. They need to get a guy that is, on the edge of being in the NBA, isn't quite there yet. I think is super important. You're looking at a guy that maybe is a junior at a different school, but it's a Division I school, and to put up 15 a game, maybe in the Pac-12 or the SEC or whatever, and they want one more year in college basketball, and that's when you get those guys to come be almost like a mercenary for a year, and fill in the roster gaps and let the young guys develop, because KU's roster, I think, next year is going to be really, really young. And you're looking at guys like Bobby Pettiford and Dajuan and all these other guys being veterans on the team, and Bobby still has ways to go. Yesufu still has ways to go. They need to have some internal improvement to showcase that they get sort of rotation minutes consistently. There's a lot of question marks for this team, and I think the portal is going to be fascinating. I posted on Twitter, Jeff Brazzulo had an article, I think in mid-February or early March, where basically out of the top 100 recruits in the freshman class, I think only 15 of them basically hit double-digit points, versus out of the top 100 transfers, 62 of them hit double-digit points. So there's a clear, you can come in, you can trust transfers to be, ready to go and play good minutes like Kevin McCullough did for Kansas this year, versus you're relying on 4 freshmen to come in and hoping one of them hits, that 10, 15 point per game mark.
And so if I'm hearing you right, and I believe that I am, the leading scorer for Kansas in 23-24 is not on the roster right now.
I don't think so.
Right. Well, let me throw another. Let's go back to Gradey DIck just for a second. I have always believed that when you have the first opportunity to get money, get the money, because nothing's guaranteed after that. Conditions change, situations change. Your roster changes, the focus on you defensively changes. When you have the chance to get money, go get the money. And for the most part, I think that's what happens, especially in college basketball. What's changed, though, over the last couple years is NIL. And when we talk about players going to get money, the money's already there for them. I think Gradey DIck has the opportunity to be the most valuable NIL athlete at Kansas for the Mass Street Collective is what they call it, and not the life-changing money, I suppose, that an NBA contract, especially a lottery contract, can bring, but enough to give you a little, to make it part of the conversation, and that's what we're doing right now. Could it be part of the conversation for Gradey? Shreyas, what do you think?
The funny thing is, I think if you ask me that question about like 90% of the players that are like a freshman at whatever school and are looking at potential lottery picks, I'd say there's no doubt in my mind those guys are going to go pro. But with Gradey, I think there is a sliver of a chance. I'm not going to say there's a high sliver of a chance, but I'd say he probably has a higher chance to come to Kansas than a guy like Keontae George has to come back to Baylor. There's history there. There's tradition. He wants to be remembered at Kansas for not just his play on the court, but leaving an impact off the court. And he's been candid about it. When I did that feature interview, I sort of asked him, hey, you're in NBA draft odds. You see the lottery odds. You see that you're always, mocked high up there. What does that mean to you? And he's like, it's great, but I'm not really focused on that. Like I look at it and I see I'm honored to be, projected to be in the NBA draft. But he's basically like, I want to leave a legacy behind that I was more than just a shooter at Kansas. So maybe there is that, feeling of, obviously the NIL money plays a factor, but I think for Gradey, if he comes back, there might just be a feeling of, I can be so much better than I was last year. Here's what I need to do. And, I could do it for a team that I grew up rooting for. I mean, for God's sake, he had a Bill Self bobblehead in his room since he was like 8 years old. That family has been Kansas fans for generations, and, his brothers, his sister have gone to Kansas, and the opportunity for him to play at Allen Fieldhouse is like a dream come true, like he said many times. So there is a chance. I'd say maybe 15%, 20% he comes back, which is, I think, a lot higher than most freshmen around the country who are projected lottery picks.
Okay, Gary, break down the scholarship situation. I know it's so fluid, but KU's operating with one less, is it not?
Yeah, we haven't really asked Bill about that. Of course, we haven't talked to him in a while.
Sure.
Since they made the announcement of the sanctions, that didn't get a lot of attention, but it was in there that they would only have 12 scholarships for, I think, the next 3 years, maybe, instead of 13. But I'd have to get out the pen and paper again after Cam Martin, but I think they've got 4 guys coming in, right? They had a full 13 scholarships. They lose 2, that's 11. They're bringing in 4 right now, so they still have to lose some guys, I think, before they can even add in the portal, but I didn't do my math before the show.
Yeah, but, I said no math would be involved, and here I am. Here I am asking for math. So, how about?
I think they have to lose 1 more minimum, and then lose some more before they do the portal thing. So,
there's some decisions like with a guy like Zach Clemens. There's some decisions to be made by them on whether they're going to be back. There just is, and there is every year now in college basketball. It's not just Kansas; it's every program, right? They all have decisions to. All the programs have players with decisions to make about their future. So, Kansas has been lucky the last, to have get an impact player. Like Kevin McCullough last year, and the national championship team, with impact players. So it's just a way of life in college basketball now. That's where we are, and I expect Kansas will have an impact newcomer that's in his 3rd or 4th or 5th year of college basketball. How about Oscar Tshiebwe? He's got another year of eligibility. Could clean up all the boards for Kansas next year. But
Yeah.
so
That would be a guy they would really want.
that guy's
if they
amazing.
could. But normally they have somebody coming back like an Ochai or a Wilson. Self would, I'm sure, do somersaults if he could get McCullough or Gradey DIck to come back, because then you have your star, McCullough defensively, DIck offensively. But without them, and you only got KJ and Dajuan, great starters but not scorers, So it's kind of scary when you think about it if you're a fan, because they got to bring in some scorers unless Ernest suddenly becomes Azubuike and Bobby Pettiford takes some major step. It's interesting because you got to score, and in the Big 12 you got to have some veterans, because all those KU games come down to the wire. And McCullough, we could go through it. He saved a lot of games, especially early in the season, Big 12. Jalen Wilson takes over. If he somehow had a Gradey DIck or a McCullough back, which the odds are almost none, Self would be, I think the train would keep chugging along really nicely with some portal guys too. But they're going to be missing that one guy. And DIck or McCullough, I don't think Bill can talk him into coming back. But we shall see. We don't know about the NIL and if they can. I don't even know if you can make offers on NIL. You get guys as much money as you can, or help them, through the Mastery Collective. So,
well, and as we said at the beginning, the first order of business is for Bill Self to get his health back, and and that would be the first huge victory in the off season for Kansas. Okay, there's going to be so much to talk about over the next few weeks with Kansas and how the 23-24 roster takes shape, and there'll be nobody better to talk about that with than Gary Bedore and Shreyas Laddha. So look for future SportsBeat KCs talking Kansas basketball and football. Looking forward to the off season, and Shreyas, we'll have a conversation about the football Jayhawks pretty soon. But thanks, guys, and we'll talk again soon. That'll do it for today. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC production team of Randy Mason, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Tip of the cap to Gary Bedore and Shreyas Laddha for sharing their insights. Morning Sports Edition, it's the best digital sports page in America. More than 40 pages today of college basketball, NFL news, the World Baseball Classic, and other spring training news, golf, tennis, the NBA, NHL, you name it, it was there. Check it out at liveedition.kansascity.com. Live Edition, one word, .kansascity.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.